She never came home from school. The disappearance of Gracie Holloway. In September 2004,
Hi there!
a 6-year-old
I'm so
girl
happy
named
to see
Gracie
you today.
Holloway walked through the front doors of Pinecrest Elementary School in Harlan, Kentucky, and never walked back out. Search teams combed every inch of the small Appalachian
I'm off
town
to
for
school.
weeks.
It's
Her
such a
photograph
beautiful
was
day.
printed on milk
See you
cartons,
later.
posted on highway billboards,
come on.
broadcast
Okay.
on every television
Race you to the
station from
swings.
Louisville
You're
to
on.
Cincinnati. No footprints, no witnesses, no ransom demand. Nothing but a pink backpack found behind the school gymnasium, its contents untouched. A half-eaten granola bar still inside. For 10 years, her mother lit a candle in the front window every single night. For 10 years, investigators followed leads that went nowhere and whispers that dissolved into silence.
Our hearts are breaking.
Then,
Please
in
help
the
us
spring
find
of
her.
2014,
She is our everything. We need her
a
back.
routine
Any
welfare
information,
check
please
on a
call.
property just 11 miles from the school led officers to a padlocked basement door. What they found behind it would shock the entire nation and rewrite everything anyone thought they knew about what had happened to Gracie Holloway. Harlan, Kentucky, sits deep in the folds of the Appalachian Mountains, a small city of roughly 8,000 people, nestled between ridges so steep they block the afternoon sun before 4 o'clock. It is the kind of place where everybody knows everybody, where church bulletins double as community news, and where a stranger's car parked on a residential street for more than an hour draws quiet attention from neighbors. The town had once thrived on coal, and the memory of that prosperity clung to its streets like old smoke, visible in the grand courthouse on the square, like the wide Victorian porches of houses that had once belonged to mine superintendents, and the tired faces of men who remembered when work was plentiful and certain. By 2004, Harlan was quieter.
I'm so glad
The
to see
mines
you.
had thinned
Me
out.
too, Grandma.
Younger
You're
people
so
had left for
strong.
I
Lexington
love
or
you.
Cincinnati or farther.
Don't you
And
worry,
those who
dear.
stayed
You'll be feeling better
built their
soon.
lives
I know,
around
Grandma. I'm
family,
glad you're here.
faith, and the particular stubbornness of mountain people who do not leave the land their grandparents worked. It was not a perfect place, but it was a community in the truest sense of the word. People left their doors unlocked. Children walked to school alone. Nobody worried much about strangers because strangers, in Harlan, were rare. The Holloway family had lived in the same house on Sycamore Road for 3 generations. Sandra Holloway, 31 years old in the fall of 2004, he had grown up in that house, married in its backyard, and brought her daughter home from Harlan ARH Regional Medical Center to sleep in the same bedroom where Sandra herself had once slept. Her mother, Ruth, lived 2 streets over and came for dinner on Sundays without fail. Sandra worked the morning shift at a local insurance office and was known around town as warm, capable, and quietly funny in the way of people who have learned that laughter is a form of survival. Gracie Holloway had turned 6 in July of that year. She was a small child, slight-framed, with dark brown hair that she wore in 2 braids her mother carefully plaited every morning. She had enormous brown eyes that her grandmother Ruth called too big for her face in the most beautiful way. She collected stickers, specifically the kind with foil and sparkle, and kept them in a purple binder she treated with the gravity of a sacred object. She was afraid of ceiling fans, convinced they would fall. She ate peanut butter sandwiches every day without tiring of them. She had recently learned to read simple chapter books and took enormous pride in this, carrying her current book tucked under one arm like a briefcase. In the fall of 2004, Gracie was just beginning 1st grade at Pinecrest Elementary, a low brick building on the eastern edge of town, surrounded by chain-link fence and a small asphalt playground. She had attended kindergarten there the year before and had settled comfortably into the rhythms of school life. Her teacher that year was Mrs. Patricia Elam, a 20-year veteran of the Harlan County school system who remembered every child she had ever taught and could tell you, and without pause, what any of them had been afraid of or loved. September 9th, 2004, was a Thursday. The morning was warm for early September, the kind of late summer warmth that feels borrowed, knowing the mountains will take it back soon. Sandra walked Gracie to the end of Sycamore Road as she did every morning. watching her daughter join the slow stream of children heading toward the school 2 blocks away. Gracie wore her favorite outfit that day, a yellow shirt with a small embroidered bee near the collar, dark jeans, and white sneakers that Sandra had bought just the week before. She carried her purple sticker binder tucked inside her pink backpack, along with her chapter book and a granola bar for morning snack. Sandra watched until Gracie disappeared around the corner onto Maple Street, and then turned back to her own walk to the insurance office. It was 7:48 in the morning. She would not see her daughter again for 10 years. Gracie arrived at Pinecrest Elementary and was signed in by the front office at 7:59 a.m. Mrs. Elam took attendance at 8:10 and noted Gracie present. The first 2 periods of the day passed normally. Gracie participated in a reading exercise, completed a math worksheet, and ate her granola bar during morning snack time. At 10:15, the class was given a 15-minute outdoor recess on the playground adjacent to the gymnasium building. What happened during those 15 minutes would become the center of an investigation that would consume thousands of man-hours, generate hundreds of pages of reports, and eventually reveal a horror no one in Harlan had imagined possible. At 10:30, when Mrs. Elam called her class back inside, Gracie Holloway was not on the playground. At first, Mrs. Elam assumed the child had gone inside early to use the restroom. She checked the bathroom. Empty. She checked the hallway. Empty. She checked the classroom. Empty. It was 10:37 when she notified the front office. It was 10:42 when the principal, Don Burchett, ordered a full lockdown of the building and called the Harlan Police Department. The responding officer arrived at 10:51. By 11:15, the school was surrounded by every available unit from the Harlan City Police and the Harlan County Sheriff's Department. By noon, the Kentucky State Police had been contacted. By 1 o'clock in the afternoon, Sandra Holloway was sitting in a chair in the principal's office, her face the color of chalk, and answering the same questions over and over with the mechanical patience of someone whose mind has gone somewhere else entirely. Her daughter was gone. 6 years old, missing from a lockdown elementary school in a town of 8,000 people on a Thursday morning in September. How was that possible? The search began immediately and with extraordinary force. Harlan, despite its size, had a tight network of law enforcement and civic organizations that mobilized with impressive speed. Volunteer fire departments, church groups, the local veterans post, scout troops, teachers, parents, coal company workers on their days off. Within 2 hours of the initial call, more than 300 people were organized into search teams and fanning out through the town and surrounding hills. The K-9 units from the state police arrived by mid-afternoon. The dogs were given Gracie's scent from a sweater taken from her bedroom and immediately began working from the school's perimeter. They followed a trail from the edge of the playground, around the rear corner of the gymnasium building to a narrow gravel service road that ran behind the school property. There, at the edge of the service road where it met a shallow drainage ditch, they found Gracie's pink backpack. It was lying in the ditch as if tossed or dropped quickly. The zipper was partially open. The granola bar wrapper was still inside, along with 2 library books, a pencil case, and the purple sticker binder. The sticker binder was the detail that broke Sandra Holloway when she was told about it. Her daughter never went anywhere without that binder. She would not have left it willingly. The dogs lost the scent trail at the service road. The gravel surface offered nothing. If a vehicle had been parked there, it had left no visible tracks in the dry September weather. The road connected to a larger county road about a quarter-mile north, which in turn connected to US 421, the main highway running through Harlan. Someone who knew the area, someone who had done reconnaissance, could have been in and gone in minutes. By evening of the first day, investigators had established a working theory. Gracie had been approached, possibly lured, while the other children were occupied on the main playground equipment. The gymnasium building blocked the sight line from the teacher's supervision area to the back corner of the playground where the service road was accessible through a gap in the fence, and a gap that should have been repaired months earlier according to maintenance records. Someone had known about that gap. Someone had been watching. The FBI was formally requested and arrived the following morning. Special Agent Thomas Reed, assigned to the Louisville field office and experienced in child abduction cases, took over coordination of the federal portion of the investigation. He was a quiet man with a methodical manner and the particular kind of patience that comes from having seen terrible things and learned that emotion, however justified, does not find missing children. Agent Reed's first action was to order a comprehensive review of all sex offenders registered within a 50-mile radius of Harlan. There were 37. Each was visited, interviewed, and alibi verified within 48 hours. The all 37 were eliminated as suspects within the first week. His second action was to interview every adult who had had any contact with the school property in the 30 days preceding Gracie's disappearance. Maintenance workers, delivery drivers, parents who volunteered in classrooms, the exterminator who came monthly, the woman who sold school portraits every October and had come early to arrange logistics. All were interviewed, all were investigated, most were eliminated quickly, a few required more careful attention. Among those requiring more careful attention was a man named Gerald Prewitt, 44 years old, who drove a delivery truck for a regional food service company that supplied the school's cafeteria. His route brought him to the school's loading dock, located on the same side of the building as the gymnasium and the service road, every Tuesday and Thursday morning. September 9th had been a Thursday. Prewitt was interviewed on September 11th. He was cooperative, well-spoken, and provided his delivery manifests and truck GPS logs without being asked. The GPS logs confirmed his truck had been at the school's loading dock from 9:47 to 10:06 a.m. that morning, departing 20 minutes before recess began. His next stop was a middle school cafeteria 9 miles away, where staff confirmed his arrival at approximately 10:28. The timeline was tight but possible. Agent Reed had Prewitt watched for 2 weeks. Nothing developed. His home was searched with consent. Nothing unusual was found. He was placed in a pending category, not cleared, not charged, and investigators moved on. The tips came in steadily through the dedicated hotline, hundreds in the first week, tapering to dozens by the end of the month. Someone had seen a girl matching Gracie's description at a rest stop on I-75. Someone had seen a man behaving oddly near an elementary school in Corbin, 40 miles west. Each tip was investigated, tracked, and logged. Sandra Holloway gave a press conference on September 14th, 5 days after her daughter vanished. She stood at a podium outside the Harlan County Courthouse, flanked by her mother Ruth and a victim's advocate from the state attorney's office. She was steady in a way that was almost unbearable to watch, the steadiness of someone who has decided that falling apart is a luxury she cannot afford. "Gracie is a first grader," Sandra said. "She is 6 years old. She weighs 42 pounds. She has brown hair and brown eyes, and she is afraid of ceiling fans, and she likes stickers and peanut butter sandwiches, and she needs to come home." She paused. "If anyone has seen my daughter, please call the number on the screen. Please. I am asking anyone who knows anything to call. I am begging you." As September became October and October became November, the organized search effort wound down from a roar to a persistent hum. The state police maintained an active case file. The FBI kept Gracie's information in the national database. The Harlan Police Department assigned Detective Raymond Combs as the primary investigator, a role he would maintain with varying levels of active attention for the next decade. Detective Combs was 51 years old, a Harlan native, a man who had been born in the county, educated in its schools, married a woman from Loyal who was now his ex-wife, and planned to die within its borders. He had worked homicides and assaults and domestic violence cases with equal thoroughness, and he was not a man who closed a file until it was finished. He would come to know every detail of the Gracie Holloway disappearance the way some people know the Bible, chapter, and verse, the specific weight of each fact. In November 2004, Combs focused his attention on a neighborhood approximately 2 miles from Pinecrest Elementary called Ridgecrest Hollow, a cluster of older homes sitting at the base of a wooded ridge on the southeastern edge of Harlan. Several tips, mostly anonymous, had mentioned unusual activity in the area in the days following Gracie's disappearance. A car that ran at odd hours, a house where the shades were always drawn, and a man who used to wave to neighbors but had stopped. The house in question was at 14 Piney Branch Road. It was a single-story structure built in the early 1970s, cedar-sided, with a carport on the left and a detached garage in the back. It sat on roughly an acre of land, shielded from the road by a stand of mature pines that had grown so thick over the decades that the house itself was barely visible from the street. The property was owned by a man named Wendell Crutcher, 63 years old. He had lived there since 1988, after inheriting it from his deceased parents. He was not married, had no children, and worked irregularly as a handyman and small engine repairman. He was known to neighbors as quiet, sometimes gruff, but not threatening. He attended no church, participated in no community organizations, and his name appeared nowhere in the organized volunteer search for Gracie Holloway. Combs knocked on the door of 14 Piney Branch Road on November 3, 2004. Crutcher answered after a long delay. He was a heavy-set man with large hands and small, pale eyes, wearing work clothes that smelled of grease and cigarette smoke. He answered Combs's questions in a flat, unhurried way. He said he had not seen anything unusual. He said he had been home most of that day doing engine work in his garage. He did not invite Combs inside. Combs had nothing to press him with. No evidence, no witness placing Crutcher near the school, no prior record of any offense against a child. He noted the visit in his file.
Hi there! I'm so
noted the
happy to
man's
see
manner
you today.
as guarded without being overtly alarmed, and moved on to other leads. He would return to that file entry again and again over the next decade.
Hi there!
Each time
I'm off
reading
to school.
his own handwriting
such a
from that
beautiful
November
day.
afternoon,
See you later.
and thinking about what he had not
Hey,
been
come
able
on.
to see.
Okay.
Christmas
Race you to the
2004
swings.
came to Sycamore Road without Gracie. Sandra left her daughter's stocking hung on the mantel and did not take down the Christmas tree until March, when Ruth finally came over one afternoon and gently dismantled it, while Sandra sat in the kitchen drinking coffee and staring at the window. The candle burned every night in the front window, the one
Please, if
Sandra
anyone
had
has
put
seen
there
her,
the
call
first
the police
night and had never
immediately.
stopped
We
lighting.
need your help to bring her
Neighbors
home
on
safely.
Sycamore Road came
Our
to
hearts are
use it as a
breaking.
kind
Please
of
help
landmark.
us find her.
The
She is
house
our
on the
everything.
corner
We
where
need her
the
back.
light is
Any
always
information,
on.
please call.
The year 2005 passed. 2006. The FBI case remained technically open. The Harlan police maintained the file, but without new leads, active investigation slowed to the careful tending of existing information, rereading, rechecking, waiting for something new to appear. Gracie would have been 7 in July 2005, 8 in 2006. Sandra marked each birthday quietly, with a cake she baked herself and a candle she lit and blew out alone, making the same wish she made every night before she slept. Detective Combs called her on each anniversary of the disappearance. Just a brief call, nothing new to report, but a call nonetheless. Sandra told her mother later that those calls meant everything. In the wider world, missing child cases were changing. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children had expanded its digital presence significantly. Gracie's case was featured in an online database with age
I'm so
progression
glad to see
photographs
you.
showing
too,
what she
Grandma.
might look
You're
like
so
at 8,
strong.
10,
I love
12. The photographs
Don't you worry,
circulated
dear. You'll be
periodically,
feeling better
hoping
soon.
someone
I
might
know,
recognize
Grandma. I'm
the
glad
face.
you're here.
Years passed. 2007, 2008, 2009, 2010. At 14 Piney Branch Road, Wendell Crutcher continued to live as he always had. He repaired small engines. He drove his truck to the hardware store and the grocery, and occasionally to a bar on the county line. He kept his shades drawn. He did not wave to neighbors anymore. In his basement, behind a door he had reinforced in October 2004 with a new frame, new hinges, and a padlock whose key he wore on a chain around his neck, Gracie Holloway grew from 6 years old to 7, to 8, to 9, to 10, to 11. She had been there from the beginning. What happened on September 9th, 2004, and during those 15 minutes of morning recess, was reconstructed over many months through Gracie's own account, given painstakingly and with enormous difficulty to investigators and therapists beginning in 2014. Crutcher had been watching Pinecrest Elementary for several weeks before that September morning. He had identified the gap in the fence behind the gymnasium during a slow drive past the school on the county road one afternoon in August, had returned twice more on foot to confirm its location and assess the sightlines. He had noted the recess schedule by watching from his truck, parked on the county road at a distance that drew no particular attention in a town where people often pulled over to make phone calls or eat lunch. On September 9th, he parked his truck on the service road behind the school at 10:10 a.m., 5 minutes before recess began. He had spent 3 weeks building a reason for Gracie to trust him. He had a dog, a large brown mixed breed named Buck, and he had arranged, twice in the preceding weeks, to be walking Buck on the sidewalk near the school's front entrance during morning drop-off, making sure Gracie saw the dog, ensuring she had petted it both times while he stood quietly to the side. Children who fear strangers do not fear the owners of dogs they have already touched and loved. When Gracie came through the gap in the fence, she had not been lured or grabbed. She had been called. He had the dog with him. He called to her by name, which she knew because he had told her his name was Mr. Wendell and that he walked Buck near her school every morning. And he said Buck was sick and could she come say hello because it would make him feel better. He said it would only take a minute. It took less than a minute. He had a cloth already soaked. It was quick. She was in the truck before any of the other children noticed she was gone. She remembered almost nothing of the drive. She remembered waking up in the dark. The basement at 14 Piney Branch Road was approximately 12 feet wide and 20 feet long, with a low ceiling and concrete block walls that had been there since the house was built. Crutcher had spent the weeks before September 2004 preparing it. He had installed a cot, brought down blankets and a small electric heater, stocked shelves with canned food and water jugs. He had covered the single small window, which was at ground level on the east side of the house, with plywood screwed from the outside, and a heavy curtain hung from inside. He had installed a small lamp with a timer. He had put a bucket in the corner. This preparation revealed something investigators would later describe as the most chilling element of the entire case. He had planned it in detail and in advance. This was not impulse. This was not a moment of terrible opportunity taken without forethought. This was constructed, deliberate, and patient. The basement had been made ready before Gracie was chosen. In the days following September 9th, when Harlan was saturated with search teams and law enforcement and media, Crutcher stayed home. He did not drive his truck. He did not answer his door except for the single visit from Detective Combs in November, which he had prepared for and managed with the coldness of someone who had spent his life hiding things. He had food enough for months. He had water. He waited. Below him, through the floor, Gracie waited too. She was too young to understand what had happened or what it meant or how long she would be there. She cried for days. He brought food and said nothing while she cried. After some time, the crying became less constant, not because she was less frightened, but because a child's body eventually cannot sustain that level of distress without sleep, and sleep would come and then she would wake and it would begin again, but differently each time and slowly, over terrible weeks and months, a new and diminished kind of normal settled over her like ash. She did not know it was winter until he brought down a heavier blanket. Honey, she did not know it was Christmas. She did not know her mother had put a candle in the window. He spoke to her rarely. He brought food. He brought books sometimes, though they were not the right books and were too old for her, adult paperback novels and outdated encyclopedias. She could not read them at first, but she looked at the pictures in the encyclopedias for hours. She memorized the shapes of continents. She learned the difference between cumulus and cumulonimbus clouds from a diagram on page 347 of a 1979 World Book volume. He was not violent toward her in the ways that investigators might initially have feared. His horror was of a different and, in some ways, more psychologically complex kind. He wanted, in some distorted and unreachable part of himself, to keep her. Not to hurt her, in his own diseased understanding of that word, but to possess her the way someone might possess an object they could not bear to be without. He brought her things sometimes. A stuffed animal he had bought at a dollar store and left outside her door. A box of crayons, a coloring book. Once, a sticker sheet with foil stars on it, which she pressed immediately into the pages of one of the encyclopedias and which she kept for years. She grew. She was 7 in the basement, and she marked it herself with a small mark scratched into the concrete wall with a nail she had found in a crack in the floor. She was 8 and marked it. 9 and marked it. The marks were not precise because she had no reliable way to track the calendar, but they were close. She was counting. She taught herself to read using the encyclopedias, piecing together phonics from her memory of first grade and cross-referencing the pictures with the words beside them until the words began to make sense. By the time she was 9, she could read most of the adult text, slowly and with effort, but she could read. She read everything in the basement multiple times. She knew more about cloud formations, the geography of South America, the migratory patterns of Arctic terns, and the manufacturing process of steel than most adults. She knew almost nothing about what was happening in the world above her head. He replaced the books occasionally, bringing down different ones when she left the old ones stacked neatly by the door. He would simply arrive one day with a new stack and take the old ones away. It was the closest thing they had to a form of communication that was not entirely one-sided. Though she did not stop being afraid. The fear became a texture she lived inside rather than a condition that disrupted her, the way people who live near train tracks eventually stop hearing the trains. It was always there. She had simply learned to function within it because there was no other option. She prayed. She had been taken before she understood much about formal prayer, but she remembered her grandmother Ruth saying grace before Sunday dinner and the way that felt. Like a warm room. She made her own prayers up, talking quietly to a God she addressed by name, telling him specific things she remembered about home and asking him directly and sometimes impatiently when he was planning to address the situation. These prayers became longer and more elaborate over the years, but they were one of the few activities that used her full intelligence and creativity. She invented games. She memorized the pattern of cracks in the ceiling. She learned to do arithmetic in her head. She composed songs that she sang to herself very quietly, not quite sure why she kept her voice low, but somehow always knowing to. She grew. She was 12 years old. She was taller now than when she had arrived, tall enough that the cot, which had been child-sized, was becoming uncomfortable. He brought down a different cot at some point, a full adult-sized one, and she realized when she lay on it that she was not the same size she had been. She had no mirror. She did not know what she looked like. She ran her hands over her face sometimes in the dark and tried to understand the shape of herself. Her hair had grown very long. He gave her a pair of scissors once, dull ones, and she had trimmed it herself by feel, not very successfully. She had grown used to it, long and thick and sometimes matted, which she worked out with her fingers for lack of a brush. He gave her a comb eventually. She combed her hair obsessively after that, one of the few sensory pleasures available to her. She had not seen sunlight in years. Her skin was very pale. Her eyes, accustomed to the low wattage of the single lamp that clicked on and off on its timer, were extremely sensitive. In 2011, something changed. Crutcher's health began to deteriorate. He was 68 years old and had spent decades in physical labor and physical neglect of himself, eating poorly, smoking steadily, drinking more than he should. He had a heart episode in March of that year and began to slow down noticeably. He came to the basement less frequently. The food deliveries became irregular. There were days when Gracie rationed carefully what she had, stretching canned goods across 2 or 3 days. She noticed his slowing. She was 13 by then, a girl who had been educating herself in an underground room for 7 years, and she noticed everything. She noticed that his footsteps on the floor above her were heavier, slower, sometimes accompanied by a pause that suggested he had sat down midway across the room. She noticed that the padlock sometimes rattled for longer before it opened, as if his hands were not as certain. She noticed that once, in the summer of 2012, she heard him fall somewhere above her, a heavy thud followed by a long silence. Oh, she had screamed then. Not out of fear for him, but out of a sudden, terrible realization that if he died, if he fell and lay there and no one came, she would be locked in this basement with whatever food was left, and she would simply stop existing. She had screamed until her voice gave out, and then she had hammered on the basement door with both fists until her hands bled. The door did not move. He had recovered. He brought food the next day and said nothing. But she did not stop thinking about what would happen if he did not. She began, carefully and systematically, to search for any weakness in her confinement. She had done this before, in the early years, but with the helpless instinct of a frightened child. Now she did it with the methodical mind of someone who had spent years thinking. She examined every inch of the walls. She tested the door repeatedly, not with frantic pushing, but with measured, specific pressure, learning the exact play in the frame, the exact sound the hinges made. She found nothing that gave her a way out. But she learned everything there was to know about the room she was in. She was 14, 15. She had now been in the basement for more of her life than she had spent above it. Her memories of the world outside had taken on the quality of photographs, flat and fixed, not the living texture of experience. She remembered her mother's face, but could not always hold it clearly. She remembered the smell of the kitchen on Sycamore Road, something like coffee and dish soap and the particular warmth of a house where someone is always home. She was not the child who had been taken. That child had existed for 6 years and then been placed underground. And in the 10 years that followed, a different person had grown in her place, one that the little girl from Pinecrest Elementary would not have recognized, one who had been shaped entirely by darkness and silence and the exercise of a mind that had nothing but itself to work with. She was fierce. She was strange. She was, in the particular way of those who have survived sustained and extraordinary isolation, more deeply herself than most people ever become, because there had been nothing to distract her from the work of being herself. She was also, in ways she could not fully understand, profoundly damaged in ways that would take years to begin to map. In the spring of 2014, Wendell Crutcher's neighbor on Piney Branch Road, a woman named Darlene Sizemore, who had lived in the house next door for 30 years, called the Harlan non-emergency line to report that she had not seen her neighbor in what she estimated was 10 or 12 days. She said his truck was in the carport, his mail was piling up in the box, and the dog, which normally barked at everything, had not made a sound in over a week. She was not particularly concerned about Crutcher himself, but the dog worried her. The responding officer, a young patrolman named Chris Blevins, who had been on the force for less than 2 years
I'm so happy
and had
to
been
see
in
you
grade
today.
school when Gracie Holloway disappeared, drove to 14 Piney Branch Road on the afternoon of April 3rd, 2014, a Thursday.
Hi there, I'm off
He
to
knocked
school.
on the front door.
It's such
No
a beautiful
answer.
day.
He knocked again
See you
and called
later.
out to identify himself.
Hey, come on.
Nothing.
Okay.
And he
Gracie,
walked
to
around
the
the
swings.
exterior of the
Run.
house. In the garage, he found the dog. Buck was long dead, had been dead for some time, lying near a water bowl that had been empty for days. Officer Blevins called for backup and requested authorization for a welfare check entry. His sergeant arrived within 20 minutes and authorized entry. They
Please, if
found
anyone
Wendell
has seen
Crutcher
her,
on the
call the
kitchen
police
floor.
immediately.
He had
We
been
need your
dead for
help to bring her
approximately
home
9
safely.
days. The
Our hearts
medical
are breaking.
examiner would
Please
later
help us
determine
find her. She is our
cardiac
everything. We
arrest.
need her back. Any information,
While his
please
sergeant
call.
called the county coroner, Officer Blevins walked through the house. He moved through the living room, the kitchen where the body lay, a bedroom, a bathroom, a small back room. He found the basement door in the hallway. It was unusual because of the heavy padlock mounted on a reinforced hasp. It the kind of hardware typically used on an exterior door rather than an interior one. He stood in front of it for a moment, the door's presence nagging at something in his training that he could not quite articulate. Then, because he was 24 years old and knew enough that his instincts had not yet been dulled by routine, he pressed his ear to the door and listened. From the other side, very faint, barely audible through the heavy door, came a sound. He described it later in his official report as a kind of tapping. Rhythmic, deliberate, 3 taps and then a pause, 3 taps and then a pause. Like a signal from someone who understood that pattern means person. His sergeant found him still standing in front of the door, not moving. "There's someone in there,"
I'm so glad to
Blevins
see you.
said.
Me too,
His sergeant
Grandma.
pressed
You're
his own
so
ear to the
strong.
door.
I love
3
you.
taps. A pause.
Don't you worry, dear. You'll
3
be feeling
taps.
better soon.
I
He
know,
called
Grandma.
it in
I'm
at
glad you're
3:47 p.m. Within 20 minutes, the Harlan Police Department had 5 units on scene, including Detective Raymond Combs, who had been at his desk reviewing old files when the call came in on the radio. When he pulled up to 14 Piney Branch Road and saw the address, something tightened in his chest that he did not name until later. They cut the padlock with bolt cutters. 2 officers went in first, tactically, because they did not yet know what they were walking into. The basement was lit by a single lamp. In its light, in the far corner of the room, pressed against the concrete wall with her knees pulled to her chest, was a young woman. She had very long dark hair, tangled and loose around her face. Her skin was extremely pale, almost translucent in the low light. She was wearing layered clothing that was too large for her, and her eyes, when the officer's flashlight beams swept the room, contracted sharply, and she flinched away from the light with a sound that was not quite a word. She was 16 years old. She had been in that basement for 9.5 years. Detective Combs came to the top of the stairs when the tactical officer called up that the room was clear and that there was a juvenile female, apparently alive and conscious. He came down the stairs 1 step at a time, slowly, making no sudden movements, saying nothing. He sat down on the bottom step and looked across the room at the girl in the corner. She was looking at him from behind the curtain of her hair, just her eyes visible, enormous and dark and terrified, and something else. Something that took him a moment to identify. And they were intelligent, sharply, almost alarmingly intelligent. The eyes of someone who had been thinking very hard for a very long time. "My name is Ray," he said quietly. "I'm with the police. You're safe now. Can you tell me your name?" A long pause, long enough that he wondered if she had forgotten how to speak. Then, in a voice that was rough from disuse and quiet as a confession, she said, "Gracie. My name is Gracie Holloway. I live on Sycamore Road." She had been reciting that sentence to herself, Detective Combs would learn later, every single day for 9.5 years. Not because she needed reminding, because she refused to forget. The call that Sandra Holloway received on the afternoon of April 3, 2014, came while she was folding laundry in her bedroom on Sycamore Road, and the candle in the front window had burned for 9.5 years. The house was the same house. Sandra was 41 years old, and she had aged in a way that people who carry grief for a decade age, not simply but thoroughly. The lines in her face the map of a particular kind of waiting. The voice on the phone was Detective Combs. He had insisted on making this call himself. "Sandra," he said, "we found her." She did not speak for what felt to him like a very long time. "Is she alive?" Sandra said. It was not quite a question. It was the sentence she had been afraid to finish asking for 9.5 years. "She's alive," Combs said. She's asking for you." Sandra Holloway made a sound that the detective would never be able to adequately describe to anyone who asked him about it later. It was the sound of something that had been held at extraordinary tension for an extraordinary amount of time being released all at once. Gracie was transported to Harlan ARH Regional Medical Center, the same hospital where she had been born. Sandra was there when the ambulance arrived. She was standing outside the emergency entrance in the April afternoon light when the doors opened. Gracie had been riding in the ambulance with a female paramedic who had held her hand the entire way and said very little. Gracie had been wearing a blanket around her shoulders and had kept her face turned away from the windows because the light, even the overcast April light, was more than she could bear. When the ambulance doors opened and the stretcher was brought out, Gracie had one hand raised to shade her eyes. She could not see clearly. But through the overexposed blur of the afternoon, she could see a figure standing near the entrance, and the figure had the right shape, the right stillness. Sandra Holloway did not run. She walked toward her daughter the way you approach something you are afraid might not be real. Carefully, one step and then another, until she was close enough to see the dark eyes and the long, tangled hair and the face that was not 6 years old anymore, that was 16 and marked by everything that had happened to it. But that was still, unmistakably and miraculously, Gracie. "Mom?" Gracie said, in that rough, quiet voice that had not been used much in years. Sandra put both arms around her daughter and held her. Neither of them said anything else for a long time. The medical evaluation over the following days revealed a complicated picture of a young woman who had survived extraordinary circumstances through a combination of physical resilience and what the attending psychologist, Dr. Melissa Vance, described in her initial report as remarkable and atypical psychological adaptation. Gracie was physically underweight, but not critically malnourished. Her bone density showed the effects of limited movement and no sun exposure. Her eyesight had not been permanently damaged, though she would need weeks to adjust to normal light levels. She had several untreated dental issues, a healed fracture in her left wrist from an injury she could not precisely date, various minor issues that spoke to years of medical neglect. Psychologically, the picture was far more complex. Doctor. And Vance described Gracie as presenting with a constellation of symptoms consistent with prolonged captivity, hypervigilance, extreme startle response, difficulty with open spaces and exposure, disrupted sleep architecture, and profound social disorientation. She spoke carefully and precisely, with the vocabulary of someone who had taught herself from books, and in the formal rhythm of someone who had not had a casual conversation in nearly a decade. She was also, Dr. Vance noted carefully in her report, intellectually extraordinary. Her knowledge base was eccentric in the way of someone entirely self-educated, vast in certain areas, and completely absent in others. She could speak at length about the geological history of the Appalachian mountain range, which she had read about in one of the encyclopedias, and had never heard of Facebook or the iPhone or any number of cultural landmarks of the past decade. She had missed the entire digital revolution. She had missed September 11th. She had missed the Iraq War, Hurricane Katrina, the election of Barack Obama. She had missed 10 years of the world and would need to learn it like a foreign country. She asked for 3 things in her first days at the hospital. She asked for books. She asked for a hairbrush, and she asked for her grandmother, Ruth. Ruth Holloway, 72 years old, came to the hospital and sat in the chair beside Gracie's bed and held her granddaughter's hand and talked about nothing in particular. The garden, the neighbors, what she had made for dinner the night before, her voice steady and warm and ordinary, and Gracie lay still and listened, and her face, which had been so careful and controlled since they found her, slowly changed into something that was almost the face of the child she had been. The investigation into Wendell Crutcher's crimes was conducted simultaneously with Gracie's medical care. Crutcher himself was dead, which foreclosed the possibility of prosecution, but did not close the investigation. The basement was documented exhaustively, every item cataloged, the marks on the wall measured and recorded, the encyclopedia pages with their foil star stickers photographed and preserved, the cot, the lamp, the bucket, the crayon drawings that Gracie had made, hundreds of them, stored in a cardboard box beneath the cot, her decade of interior life translated into line and color. The drawings were eventually turned over to Gracie as her property. She kept them. She had not known she would want them until she had them in her hands and realized they were the only physical record of the years she had lost. A strange archive, a childhood underground. The community response to Gracie's recovery was overwhelming in the way of small towns where a loss has been shared by everyone for a long time. The same people who had searched the hills in September 2004 now gathered outside the hospital, quietly, not pressing, simply present. People left flowers at the end of Sycamore Road. Church congregations held services of thanksgiving. The elementary school where Gracie had disappeared flew its flag at full mast for the first time in years on the day she was found. Sandra Holloway gave no press conferences in the immediate aftermath. But a statement was issued through the Harlan Police Department thanking the community and law enforcement and asking for privacy during what she called the miracle we were not sure was still coming. Gracie spent 3 weeks in the hospital before returning home to Sycamore Road. The candle in the front window was burning when she arrived. Sandra had lit it that morning as she had lit it every morning for 9.5 years, and Gracie, standing in the front walk looking at the house for the first time since she was 6, saw it in the window and understood what it meant, that her mother had kept the light on every day, that she had been waited for without certainty and without surrender. She went inside. She stood in the hallway, which was the same narrow entryway with the same coat rack and the same slightly uneven floor, and she breathed in the smell of the house, coffee and dish soap and warmth, and something in her that had been held rigid for a very long time began, slowly and carefully, and not all at once, to let go. It would not be quick. Dr. Vance had been honest with both Sandra and Gracie about the road ahead. The trauma of 10 years of captivity does not dissolve in the relief of freedom. It must be worked through systematically, painfully over years, with professional support and extraordinary patience. There would be setbacks. There would be nights worse than others. Gracie understood this better than most people would have. She was 16 and had spent a decade with nothing but her own mind for company. She knew what it meant to work at something slowly and deliberately over a long time. She knew how to be patient with a process that moved in small increments. She told Dr. Vance in one of their early sessions, in the careful, formal voice she was gradually beginning to relax, "I know how to wait. I've been waiting a long time. I just need to learn how to wait for different things now." In the years following her recovery, Gracie Holloway's story became one that journalists, psychologists, and advocates returned to repeatedly, not because it had a tidy resolution, but because it raised questions that resisted easy answers. How had she survived psychologically? What had the isolation done to her? What had it made her? Dr. Vance published a paper in 2017 with Gracie's full consent and collaboration, and examining the psychological profile of long-term captivity survival with particular attention to self-developed coping mechanisms. The paper described how Gracie had built internal structures to replace the external structures that had been taken from her. Prayer, intellectual self-education, rigorous daily routine, the invention of games and systems, the careful maintenance of personal identity through repetition of known facts about herself. My name is Gracie Holloway. I live on Sycamore Road. This last mechanism, which Gracie had described to Dr. Vance in detail, became one of the most cited elements of the paper. The deliberate, daily, systematic refusal to allow her identity to erode, the insistence on saying her own name and address to herself. It was understood by psychologists as an instinctive and remarkably effective form of identity preservation under conditions designed, whether consciously or not, to dissolve it. She had refused to stop knowing who she was. Gracie eventually agreed to speak publicly about her experience, first in a limited interview with a journalist from a Louisville newspaper whose work she had read and whose approach she trusted, and later in a longer format with a documentary filmmaker. She was 22 when the documentary was released, and she spoke in it with the same careful precision and occasional dry humor that had become characteristic of her. She was asked in the documentary what she wanted people to take away from her story. She thought about it for a moment in the unhurried way she had. I want people to understand that children survive things that they should not have to survive," she said. "And that surviving is not the same as being okay. And that being not okay is not the same as being broken. Those are different things. I survived. I'm not always okay. I'm not broken." A pause. "And I'm still learning the difference between all of those things." Detective Raymond Combs retired from the Harlan Police Department in 2016. At his retirement party, Blevins asked him the question that had never quite been settled. "In 2004, Blevins said, when you knocked on Crutcher's door,
I'm so happy to
did you
see
know
you
something
today."
was wrong?" Combs stood with his hands in his pockets for a long time, looking at the lights of the town on the hillside. "I knew something,"
Hi there,
he said
I'm off
finally.
to school. It's
"I didn't
such a
know
beautiful
what
day.
I knew."
See you later.
He was quiet for a moment.
Hey, come on.
I've thought
Okay.
about that a lot.
Race you to the swings.
Would you have done
Run.
anything different? I didn't have grounds then. I had a feeling and I had nothing else. You can't get a warrant on a feeling. He looked back at the hillside. "But I've thought about it a lot. Every day for 10 years I thought about it." On Sycamore Road, the house where Sandra Holloway had kept a candle burning for
Please,
9
if
and a
anyone
half
has
years,
seen her, call the police
continued to
immediately.
stand
We
at the
need your
corner.
help to bring her home
The candle
safely.
no longer burned
Our hearts
there
are breaking.
every night.
Please help us
It
find her.
burned
She is our
sometimes
everything.
by
We need her
choice,
back. Any
when
information,
Sandra
please
or
call.
Gracie wanted it to, which was often but not compulsively. It had changed from vigil to ritual, from holding on to remembering. That was a different kind of light, and in some ways, more durable. Gracie Holloway enrolled in the Harlan County Adult Education Program at 17 and earned her GED at 18, the placing in the highest percentile in every subject. She attended a community college in Middlesboro beginning at 19, studying biology with a focus on ecology, a choice she explained to Dr. Vance as stemming from her decade with the encyclopedias and a particular fascination with the world that existed above ground while she had been below it. She graduated with honors. She works with a nonprofit organization that advocates for resources for children in long-term foster care and for survivors of captivity, work she described in the documentary as putting the strange education she got to use. She has a garden. She tends it carefully and with great attention, learning the specific
so glad to
requirements
see
of
you.
each plant,
Me too, Grandma.
the right amount
You're
of
so
light
strong.
and water and
I love
space, the conditions
Don't
under
you
which
worry,
living
dear.
things can
You'll be
grow.
feeling better soon.
She
I
is
know,
very
Grandma.
good at
I'm
it.
glad you're here.
She still has the foil star sticker, the one he had brought her once, pressed between the pages of the encyclopedia, the one she had kept for
Hi
all
there.
those years
I'm so
underground.
happy to see you today.
She did not throw it away when she came home. She had thought about why she kept it, and the answer was complicated. But it had something to do with the fact
Hi
that
there.
even in the
I'm off
worst
to school.
circumstances,
It's such a
she had
beautiful
managed
day.
to find
See
something
you later.
small and good and keep
Hey,
it.
come on. Okay.
That seemed important to
Race
her.
you to the swings.
She was not sure she could
Run.
fully explain why. If this story mattered to you, subscribe and hit the bell. Share the episode. Someone somewhere may still be waiting to be heard.